Right. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jake McKinney. Thank you so much for coming back this afternoon. Can I have you, um, John, would you mind toggling on chat and would folks put an emoji, something in the chat so I know you're out there? I can't see your faces. So although I know you're wrapped with attention, look at this. I love it. Squirrel. Oh, it's so fast. It's so fast. So speaking of chat, it is fast and is often the case with me. I vastly overestimated the number of moving parts that I would be able to keep track of all at once. I will say this more than once, but the three folks I'm going to introduce to you are amazing. They're hoping for a lot of questions. Clown. Okay, perfect. Thank you. That's like the last one I saw. Now I'm self-conscious. Let me get back to it. So a lot of these, they're going to be live. Feel free to use that chat. You're going to hear me say, John, can you toggle on or off? Cheryl and John are like rocking it. They are doing the slides and the chat respectively. So if you have a question, I would love for you to pop it in the Q&A portion. Chat is it's live, it's in the moment. I'm not going to be mad if y'all use that, and I don't think our panel is either. It just helps to get the Q&A so we can kind of go back and revisit questions. Cheryl, would you mind going, excuse me, John, would you toggle off the chat? Cheryl, would you go to the next slide, please? So I just wanted to introduce myself real quick. My name is Jake McKinney. I'm a change management analyst with the Enterprise Change Readiness Office. Short is ECRO of Labor and Industry. Short is L&I. I picked three pictures here that meant a lot to me. On the top right, I have my Halloween costume. I am twinning with my partner and I's Kitty Bain. In the middle, that is my partner Martina and I in front of Bryce Canyon. And on the far left, you are seeing me in front of a field of tulips with what I think are pretty cool socks. Hopefully you agree. So I'm not going to say too much about myself because that's not why we're here. What I do want to say, though, is that I feel so incredibly, genuinely excited to turn it over to Fran, Ben, and Sarah. Fran, I knows Cheryl D'Angelo Gary very well. Fran brought Cheryl and I up to, gosh darn it, I'm terrible. Fran, where did we go? I should know this.
Everett.
Everett, thank you. Fran brought us up to Everett to do a training. It is the first time I've ever trained for work, Fran. I think I was embarrassed to tell you that at the time. Ben is someone I've known from the OCM COP. Ben is a person who, from the first time I met him, I did not know what change management was. Ben was kind. He was accepting. He always listened to me, made me feel incredibly welcome. And Sarah is someone who I have met recently, but Sarah has been helping me so much with this presentation, just incredibly patient and kind. And I want to say, I can summarize the three of these amazing folks. I am very inexperienced with setting up a panel like this. They basically set up their own panel just to help me out. And it was absolutely wonderful. All right. So let's see how we can make this work. Before I turn it over, I just want to reiterate oh, no, actually, let me say one thing. So the neatest thing in terms of them helping me plan, we did a lot of talking and we curated some awesome questions that I think are really going to resonate with all these folks. They have obviously commonalities, but they have some things that are incredibly important to them and their change management practice. And I'll say again, use the chat anytime. Feel free to put questions in Q&A. And I believe I'm going to ask Cheryl to turn the screen, or excuse me, move the slide, and I'm going to move it over to the talented and wonderful Ben.
Thanks, Jake. I'm Ben Guss, work for the Department of Natural Resources. Yeah, as Jake said, we really want participation. And so at any point in this, really, we kind of built it around having you guys add in anything you want or clarify questions. So a little bit about me. I came out of the nonprofit world where I was managing a program helping folks in mobile home parks buy the whole mobile home park community together as a homeowners co-op, right? And so changing from a homeowner to a community owner. So really learned some hard change lessons because I had to go fast. But then I just got addicted to that. I love people and working with people, and that was, you know, a wonderful decade of helping folks really transform their lives through, you know, change management and real estate. I've got a couple kids, Theo and Lena. They're almost 9 and 5, and oh my gosh, what a change management teacher they are. You know, maybe like some of your coworkers, they have huge, big emotional responses without knowing why. They also just need snacks every 20 minutes. So great to be, you know, learning from them. And then to me, I put a quote from Catherine Price, who was defining fun as kind of that intersection between playfulness, connection, and flow. And to me, it's, you know, how do we I'm curious of how do we include that in our OCM work? Because I think, you know, we spend so much time working that it would be nice to have more fun. And I liked her definition. Oh, and fun. I like to play music. And to me, music's like a good conversation. You're really listening. And when it happens well, you have that really nice connection like you do with a real conversation. So that's me.
Thank you so much, Ben. I'm going to turn it over to Fran Lianos. Cheryl, can you go to the next slide, please? And thank you.
Hey, sorry, I needed that 10 seconds of silence while I figured out where my microphone button was. Hi, everybody. I'm Fran Lianos. I am a management analyst with Region 1, which is the northwest corner of Labor and Industries, which is how I know Jake and Cheryl. I'm in my 20th year with L&I, and I started in L&I as someone who answered the phone and took requests for an electrical inspection. So it's a classification that we don't even have anymore. And I have spent the last 20 years honing what's important to me and really focusing in on my own growth, my own development. And that journey for myself really jazzed me around helping other people and their growth and development. And so I focus a lot of my time and my energy on coaching and mentoring and really trying to understand what people need to help them grow. And if I can't give them that or help them with that, connecting them with resources that will do that for them. So that's really where my passion lays. I don't have any pictures of myself because I'm usually the one taking the pictures. And so I don't have a lot of pictures with me in them. But these are the 3 most important things to me. And I'm sorry to say, but food is first for sure. All my travel around the world has been about going to that country and having their food. So that's a big focus for me. And I do have a very large family. Half of my family is Irish and half of my family is Mexican. And there's just a lot of kids all the way around. So there's a lot of people in my generation, 2 or 3 generations of grandchildren and great-grandchildren that are happening right now. So family reunions are kind of crazy. And there's not a lot of change management happening at the family reunions. So I'm hopeful I can bring that flair to that. And my friends, I like to spend a lot of time around the people that are important to me. And that's part of what I learned in my own growth and development journey, is that the people that I surround myself are very influential in how I develop. And so I try to choose really good people, and Cheryl and Jake are really good people. This is my first time meeting Ben and Sarah, but I have a feeling they are also really good people. So I'm happy to be here and doing this panel with the 2 of them. I hope you guys enjoy yourself today. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Sarah.
Thank you, Fran. Welcome, everyone. So my name is Sarah Connolly Meyer. I'm an employee engagement and inclusion manager at the Washington State Department of Health. I came to DOH in August of 2020 and if anyone remembers, there was some big things going on in the world in August of 2020. And so it was an exciting time to transition over to DOH and be really at the epicenter of the COVID response in our state and be surrounded by so many remarkable people doing such hard work. I came from the Washington State Department of Children, Youth, and Families that had originally been part of Department of Social and Health Services. So I've been in state government, I think almost about 10 years, and started out in HR doing learning and development, transitioned to do more some research around the workforce in child welfare. And then here I am at DOH. So love what I do. I love all aspects of employee engagement, and I think change management is a big part of that. So my background's a little bit different in that I have a background in sports psychology. So if you catch me offline somewhere, I will talk your ear off about the connection between sports psychology and state government, but that's for a different episode probably. When I'm not doing this, you will for sure find me in my garden. These are a picture of my dahlias from last summer. I was very proud of. And then my other passion is whitewater rafting. So I actually just got back from a week-long trip on the Deschutes, which is amazing. That's really my happy place. And then I put a picture of my dog here. I have 2 kids, they're grown, but right now my current caretaking duties surround this white fluffy dog that, if we're really lucky, will not make an appearance during our 1 hour time, but just universal warning that she has a mind of her own. So yeah, I'm really excited to hear all of your questions and kind of dig into some really collective wisdom here.
Definitely did not know about the sports psychology, Sarah. That's really cool. Okay, Cheryl, can you go to the next slide? And let me, I have a tendency to repeat myself, but what we're hoping for is lots of engagement, all right? So I'm gonna be doing my very best to watch both Q&A and the chat. And again, we're not gonna we're not gonna ignore questions that come through in the chat. Chat's a little difficult to keep track of. So if you have a question, I'll do my best to grab it in Q&A. If you just want to throw in an emoji or you don't want to bother with the Q&A, throw it in chat. So basically what we did, again, we set up some kind of curated questions. We're going to go, what's my order here? Sarah, Fran, Ben. However, once Sarah answers, if Ben or Fran have anything to say or any of y'all have anything to type out, we would love to hear it. Hopefully those rules are very simple. I'm going to stop talking. Sarah, can you tell us about some of the shared challenges around, and I'm so sorry about the acronym, organizational change management. I apologize.
No, that's good to call it out. I think I'm sure lots of professions have their acronyms, but I think state government does them very, very well. And so, yeah, I think, gosh, this question, I pondered it and thought, kind of depending on where you are, I think it's a very broad question. But the thing that really actually jumped out to me when I think about this, the most common struggle I always have is that we exist in an environment that really values change and really values speed of change. And so as OCM practitioners, or wherever you are on that continuum of doing this type of work, it's this constant struggle and pressure to move fast, but also move slow, because that's really what people need. People need time to digest and orient themselves. And we need time to put the tools that we use into place and communication plans and those types of things. So I don't know, for me, it's always this constant struggle and challenge of knowing I'm not going to please everyone. I'm always consistently disappointing someone. Someone's always wanting more. They're wanting it faster. And so, for me, I just personally have to stop and reflect and be like, okay, take a breath. We're not going to go at the speed of light here, even though I think in state government, it's all change all the time coming at you from all different angles. And so I just have to put that aside and just accept that that's the reality that we live in. And there's nothing I can do about that. I can't add more time to our day. I can't eliminate the changes that are coming at us from the legislature or, from a public health perspective. So I just have to embrace kind of being present and in the moment. But I don't know if anyone has any solutions to the challenge of the constant change and the pace of it. I'd love to hear them.
I'm
Maybe
gonna
just
pause
add a
there.
little from, oh, go
Oh,
ahead, Fran.
sorry, Ben. I'm sorry, Ben. We didn't plan, you guys can tell we didn't plan this out really well, right? I just wanted to follow what Sarah said really quick and say that part of the thing that's very specific in my eyes, as far as no matter where you are and no matter what level of change management you're trying to be involved in, is that there's a tendency in my agency, at least, to wait until people are emotional and resistant before they call in their change manager. As if somehow the project was just going to go perfectly smoothly and now there's something wrong and they don't understand what's going on and they need a change manager. And I think that the answer to that obviously is having your change manager involved from the very beginning, building your charter. So I'm coming at this from a project management perspective. And I think that challenge of pre-training folks that change management isn't a finger you use to plug a hole in the dam. It is a system that you employ from the very beginning, thoughtfully and within a process. And that challenge, I think, is one of the biggest ones as a project manager, is educating everyone involved in your project that change management is a necessary part. It's not a finger that we can do without. It's a leg. We need it. And that feels really personal to me. So I wanted to share that. Sorry, Ben, go ahead.
No, it was perfect. Thanks, Brian. I was just a dovetail from that. To me, it's from DNR's perspective, we're not a cabinet agency. We've never had lean or OCM, organizational change management, agency-wide. And so how do we prioritize it? It's another way of saying what you said, Fran, of like, how do we get sponsorship to prioritize change management work? And how do we get understanding to then see what we're doing, the worth of what we're doing, and then to get the funding to back it?
And so
I guess if there's any, Jake, if there's any questions here of people have their challenges or stuff folks we wanted to answer about challenges that they're facing with it, we're open to do that, or we can just move on to.
No, it looks like the chat is open. And then Alenka, it says implementing change management throughout a government organization when senior leadership doesn't seem to hold department leadership accountable. And generally I would say, hey, come on in and say more about that. If you have a question, if you could feel free to put it in chat or the Q&A section is what I'm trying to say. And I'm going to keep a little counter, I'll say about 7 seconds to see if we have any questions that were inspired by question number 1. Oh, Alenka, you also said lack of accountability. I'm all about meeting people where they are, but rolling something out and then not holding people accountable makes change management very difficult. Oh, look at this. Oh, this is great. From Anita, have any of you been able to collect data that proves better outcome when organizational change management, aka OCM, is part of the project from the planning phase? Great question.
So I don't have any, like when you say data, I start to think graphs and charts and numbers and all that great stuff that we like to make our decisions on. And I don't know that we have a reliable way so far, right? Let's keep track of all of our project history. And my agency is fairly young. And so far, I don't know that we necessarily have data around involving change management at the beginning or not. I'm not sure project management folks are willing to admit when they didn't involve change management from the beginning and it caused a problem. So that could be part of why we don't have a lot of data around that, right? Because that's a mistake. That's a really big mistake. And working for the government, I think we probably all are used to the attitude of mistakes are something that you hide. And we work really hard to talk about transparency and about we want to fail forward and, learn from our mistakes. But at the same time, some mistakes are really glaring, and I think there's a tendency to hide that. So no data. However, if you've taken any of Cheryl's classes or you were here for her talk this morning, she did talk a lot about how much research is out there that shows that involving change management in projects exponentially increases the likelihood that your project will succeed. And while I don't have any, I'm not smart enough to know all the people to tell you and what book they wrote, I know it's out there. So if you start digging around and you're looking for data, you have a group of sponsors or execs that need data to make decisions, you will find the data out there that really, from both ProSci's perspective and also PMI, which is the project management folks that certify a lot of project managers, they also have a lot of research on that shows that involving project management and change management in your projects just really, really increases the percentages. And probably Cheryl would be my go-to for having those numbers on the tip of her head, but I know it's out there. Good question.
I'll just add, we use our employee engagement survey as a measure because we try really hard to integrate. We don't always do really robust OCM plans and integrations, but we do always try to use some OCM principles in big projects that we do. And so we actually look at some of our employee engagement measures as a way to see how employees are feeling about change happening. Do they feel informed and things like that? I know it's not a true research measure, but we use that as a measure.
Ben, did you have anything to add on that particular question? No pressure.
I think that covers it. I also see a whole bunch more questions.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Awesome. Okay. So, Robin, good friend Robin, how do y'all feel about times when leaders change in the middle of the change? When leaders change in the middle of the change, have you had that experience and how have you dealt with that?
Are they referring, you think the question is a leader leaves or they change their ideology or their plan? I'm assuming they mean maybe they exit or take a different position somewhere else.
Robin, would you elaborate a little bit in the chat if you don't mind too terribly? And Robin, I'm going to come back with you if that's okay. And the leader leaves the agency, says Robin.
Yeah, and was the question, how do we feel about it, or what do we do?
Yeah, how do you feel about times when leaders change in the middle of the change?
I won't speak for my colleagues here, but awful is the word that comes to mind. It's no, please don't do that. But it is a necessary, not necessary, but it's a reality of the work that we do. So I think for that reason, I try really hard to build a network of support and relationships broadly across the project. So that way, inevitably, if someone does leave, I at least have some support I can turn to and they're, maybe a little bit up to speed on the work we've been doing.
I was going to speak on this a little later, but I was asked before COVID to stand up, look at standing up an OCM shop for DNR. And it was the primary sponsor was in exec management, really behind it. He then left for health reasons, and he was the real only strong sponsor because of the lack of bench strength within that. It went to the wayside. So I'll talk more to that, but I think it was a big lesson learned for me of having more than just one real sponsor and other relationships that will back it. In this case, we didn't have that, and so it didn't go forward. But I'll talk more on that later. And I think the other question I see in there was there was a question about, I think, how do you get leaders, and not caching the chat, but how do you cell leaders on it was more or less where I was reading into the question. And some of my experience was it depends on the leader and who they are, but some leaders really need to see a financial bottom line. And so if you're making the case for said change that your initiative is needing, that you have to have that what's in it for them, and the bottom line for some management is really what they need. So reading that, where the manager is coming from and what their real interest is, but the financial part was a big one for me for several projects.
Awesome.
If I can, I'll take a quick second to answer Robin's question about when leadership changes. And I'm guessing that where that's going is that not only is that person in leadership, but they're also your sponsor, your executive sponsor on your project and of your work. And now you're looking at having a new sponsor step on. I think there's some pieces to project management specifically that really help set you up to be successful for a change like that. When you create your business case for your project, you're basically proving to your organization or your agency why we need to do this thing that we're doing. And if you're using data and you're using facts and there's stuff going on, one of the most important questions I think to cover in that is what happens if we don't do this thing that we want to do? What does that look like? And what's the outcome if we go that way instead? And something like a business case and your charter for your project, which is basically your contract, right? Those are things that you can take to a new leader and say, hey, this is how this all got started. So here's the business case. Here's a reason why we really need to do this. We're not just doing it because we want to. And here's the charter. Here's the things that the last person that was supporting this agreed to do. Are you willing to step into this charter, or do we need to go back and recharter this work? And I think just having the documents allows you to ask those kind of questions. And I have been involved in projects where the direction of the work and who was responsible for which pieces of the work changed significantly with our leadership change in the middle of the project. So we had an AD, an assistant director, as sponsorship, as the executive sponsor on our work, and he left, and we got a new one. And being able to go to that person with a really like a business case and a really well thought out, backed up idea of why this work needed to continue really helped that transition be a little bit more smooth. Now there's still coaching up involved, and obviously different people have different styles. And as Ben and Sarah have alluded to, a lot of, that depends on the leader and what they need, right? So if they need data, or if they're the kind of leader that really needs to understand how this is going to impact people. So it's kind of figuring out what their language is and making your case in a way that is most personal to them, if that helps.
That is wonderful. And Fran, while you have the hot mic, first off, I want to thank everyone out there. I was not sure if y'all would bring great questions. I don't mean it like that, but amazing questions. And I want to make sure that everything is getting captured. Okay. So anything that doesn't get answered, I promise we'll get eyes on it. So Fran, Tina's question from 118, this is something I've heard you talk about, and then I would love to hear if Ben or Sarah have any thoughts. How do you educate leadership that a change manager and a dedicated communications person are two very different roles?
I am so passionate about that. From my very first project that I got introduced to change management on, it became quickly apparent to me. And I think I saw that so many good questions, you guys. I'm trying to keep track of them, and there's so many. But I think I saw another question around this that was that equaled pieces about like, how do you make sure your sponsor understands that those roles need to be different people? And unfortunately, part of what we get as training as project managers is that oftentimes it's always you. You're managing the project, you're managing the change stuff, you're managing communications, you're doing all of that. That's you. And if you're a little bit of an experienced project manager, you got some team leads and you've split that work up as much as you possibly can. But I do agree that it's really, really important, specific to those two roles, that you have a communications consultant on your team and a change management consultant on your team that specialize in those two areas. I'm sorry, but as a project manager, you do not, I don't care who you are, you do not have the bandwidth to adequately cover all of that stuff and be making sure that your team is healthy. You don't. So I think, again, it depends on who you're trying to convince. If you're trying to convince someone who needs the data, then you go out and you find that data that shows, we have communications. Ben made a comment about how they're not a cabinet agency. So I think that means probably they don't have smaller departments that do specific things. But for us, we have a communications group. We have a whole area, a silo, if you will, that's all about communications. And we have a shop for our change managers. And so if we have them, we need to use them. They got hired for a reason, and they're specialists and they know what they're talking about, and they can really help you feel less burdened when they will draft something and bring it to you and just say, this has all the stuff in it that we need to talk about. A thumbs up or thumbs down, what do we need to do? That makes it much easier than if you're trying to do all of that yourself. So as to how you talk to them and how you convince them, it's really, again, finding out what's their value language. Do they value the bottom line? Is it the money? Is it telling them that we can make this happen faster? Or is it about staff will come along with us better if we have someone paying specific attention to change management, specifically to that? So I hope that answers a little bit of your question. Sorry, it sounds like some of my answers are the same, which I guess is probably going to happen. But yeah.
Ben or Sarah, what y'all think? Anything else to add on this particular question?
Two things quickly. One, I put it back to the group and see what other folks have found that works. Because I think we're just three of many really intelligent people with lots of experience. So feel free to put answers into the chat. And yes, we're underfunded oftentimes. And so it's put on us. I think to me, it comes to education of, if you have management that really doesn't understand, it starts at that, the start of ADKAR, really, that understanding. And understanding, like Fran said, of why we're doing, what we can and cannot do. And if we want to be successful, what's the true scope of work that we should and can do? And how do we leverage other folks that have those skill sets? But I'd be curious to hear other folks' input in the chat too.
Awesome,
I would
man.
just
Go ahead, Sarah.
also add, yeah, I think a lot of state agencies are always going to be chronically underfunded, and that's just the way some of the funding streams work for some of the state agencies. So I know what's worked for me a couple times is reaching out to staff that may not necessarily be trained yet, but maybe they have an interest or a curiosity. So tapping into your internal resources when you can, that people who want to grow their careers, they want to try different things out. I've used that strategy from time to time, giving people stretch assignments and with a lot of coaching and mentoring. And then to kind of what Fran was saying about the leadership portion, I've tried to get really good at kind of pushing back a little bit and just making clear to whoever the leader, the sponsors on the project, about what my limitations are. And then they have to choose, like, okay, I can't do all of this, and here's our staffing. What do you want to give up? What are you willing to sacrifice? Is it communications? Is it project management? Whatever, the list is, but just being really honest and, presenting them with, in some ways, the byproduct or the consequence of, hey, if we don't do communications really well, here's what I think, might happen. And then it becomes a, group conversation about, what do we need to prioritize? It's worked from time to time, but it doesn't always work. Sometimes you still get asked to do more with less and figure it out. So.
Awesome. So keep it coming in Q&A and chat. I am going to thank you so much, Cheryl. Now, Cheryl pointed out in our back chat, like, I think a lot of questions are going to be answered on this one. Probably not all of them, but some. So I'm putting Fran back on the hot seat. If I can read behind my windows here, something you mentioned to me was the concept of coaching up. Can you explain that to the audience and share why that is so important to you?
Yeah, so, wow, that's been a journey. When I very first started, my sponsorship scared the crud out of me. right? Because who am I? And here's this assistant director. And they're basically telling me what they want to have happen, which is not a project. That's an assignment. If you already know, how you want things to happen. And so I was stuck in this position of being newly trained, just got all this information. I know how this is supposed to work. And then I come back to my agency and that's not how we work at all. So I think coaching up is something that just, like, I got sucked into that from the very beginning. As far as when we started out in this agency, we got hooked on the project management train way before we got hooked on change management, or any of those other things. And our foundational thing for our agency was lean. So it helped me to be able to go back to some of the lean principles that we really, were educating, that you could find on posters hanging around our buildings, really talking to that experience and tying in pieces like, hey, we're supposed to involve the people that do the work when we're changing the work, like those kind of concepts, and bringing that in. But coaching up is something that I really grew into, I think, and it comes, for me, it came with being confident that I actually was providing a service, that I'm not trying to tell other people what I'm doing. I'm doing this in service to the success of the project. And so when I think about it that way, it was easier for me to approach my sponsors and my executive cabinet with more of an attitude of, we all want this to be successful. Here's how you can help me make this successful. Here's how your role can work in being, in having this project to be as successful as possible. And I also think it's important to know when to tell sponsors and execs, that is not the best way you can contribute to our success. Here's a way that you could contribute to our success. Because I think sometimes your sponsors, oh gosh, you guys, I can't think of a politically correct way to say this, but they like to come in and throw their weight around. And how do you allow that, or how do you manage that when it's not helpful in any way to the project? And so when you start to hit stuff like that, that's where coaching up really is important, about asking them, what kind of outcome are you looking for? And are you getting that outcome with this current behavior or this action that you're taking? And what is that? Because if you're okay with everybody being angry and upset at what's going on, then great, keep doing what you're doing. But if we want to change how people are experiencing this change, then we need to make some changes around how we're managing the information, or how your emails, the tone in the emails that we're sending out. And that's one of the things that I think some of you have asked several times. How do we get a communications person and OCM tied in? One of the things that my communication person does for me, and I've had the same one on every project I've been on in this agency, I'm so lucky. And one of the things that Matthew does for me is that he helps me really strongly define talking points for the work, key messages, 4, 5 key messages. And then you hook those to your sponsors and you tell them, if you're going to talk about this work, here's what you need to, these are the things you need to talk about, and don't talk about anything else. So, I mean, that's coaching down. I think we all are experienced with, and Sarah talked a lot about enabling folks on your staff to learn and grow, and giving them new roles and giving them new identities to fill on the project team. I fully support that. But coaching up is a little more tricky. And I think it takes a little bit more thought about the psychology behind some of the behavior that we see. So hope that helps.
Thank you, Fran. Coaching up, did that term resonate with you, Ben or Sarah?
Not hearing Sarah, I can chime in. Yeah, it's been a really tricky one, but for me particularly, being younger than a lot of executive management and looking at how do I build trust and psychological safety with them. A strategy that I've had to use is bringing people with me that they also trust, that are key to the project or the change, and lending that credibility and building that trust and psychological safety to then get to where you need to go with them. There's oftentimes egos involved. And so how do you get to that place where there is that level of psychological safety to have a real honest conversations. And so I've employed other people to help try to build that rapport and trust. So that's been a key. And then for me, also identifying where the leader's at on their individual ADKAR path and speaking to that and really kind of honing in of where are they at and what are the issues that they're grappling with on that project, and going, kind of assessing it from where they are. That's been helpful.
Any thoughts, Sarah? Again, no pressure.
Oh, yeah, no, I'm a classic overthinker, so these panels are hard for me because I'm like, oh, we could talk about this and this and this, but I'll reserve that. we can move on, or if someone in the internet interworld that we're in has a question or comment.
That is a great, yeah. Okay. So I'd like to throw it back to the Q&A for a moment. And then I have a question I tailored for Ben, but that's a spoiler. We'll get to that in a second. So throwing this out to the group from LJ Bothell. How do we work with and significantly influence the sponsors of a change management initiative? Maybe kind of comes back to coaching up. Of a change management initiative so that they can actually understand and mitigate the issues the change costs so that participants are partnership equals rather than top-down initiative casualties. Tips/techniques, please. Hard-hitting question.
I can take a stab. And I thought I heard some of the similar kind of phraseology in the earlier session. If that's true, and if I'm reading into it right, maybe there's a cultural piece in there. Kind of looking at the top-down hierarchy and decision-making and empowerment of staff, and how is that, and how do you change the culture to look at shifting from more of a hierarchical decision-making and empowerment structure to a more flat, even structure that empowers staff. If I'm right, culture takes forever to change. Not forever, a long time. I think Cheryl touched on it this morning. I think if the statistic was right, 6 to 16 years is what she said, is with some of the research of changing culture. And if you're looking at decision-making where, the management is doing everything and telling staff to what to do and not having kind of a flatter decision-making and empowerment structure, it could be a cultural piece, but I might be off there. So feel free to let me know if I'm off.
So I'll tell you what, y'all, it is fast approaching like 1:45. I was hoping maybe we could do one more question and then do our best to just address them as they come in, if that's all right. Awesome. Thank you. When it comes to organizational change management, what has worked for you and what hasn't? And I definitely, I'm gonna call on Ben to answer this first, please.
Okay, lessons learned. I'm just going to go with what hasn't worked. Right? I think it's easier to. Lessons learned are good, hard lessons. And I had mentioned it earlier. I had been asked to help out with at DNR, largest section is timber sale. Well, can everyone hear me?
Oh, you're back.
Okay.
Hi, Ben.
So the timber sales section we're looking at, I was asked to help with kind of a two-part, one part lean, one part OCM work to look at efficiencies in the timber sale program. And so we had a year plus of doing some successful projects. And from that, we're asked to look at developing a proposal for the whole agency to do OCM work. Had one sponsor that was really behind it, an executive sponsor that really, was pushing for it, advocating, do everything that a sponsor really should be doing. And they left due to health reasons, but that really, it derailed the whole process. We had other support, but we also were, management was putting out many other fires. And because we didn't have a critical bench strength of executive support, the project just didn't go forward because, even though we had a proposal that outlined, many projects with many staff buy-in, that we had a whole process of 20 projects that staff were behind, middle management was behind, and most of the executive management was behind. We had a budget that detailed the cost savings. We got the green light. We didn't have the executive sponsorship, and if we did enough executive sponsorship to keep that momentum going. And so really having that bench strength and executive sponsorship, or true with a sponsorship at the level that you need, that was the hard lesson. Things that worked, of course, relationships, right? It goes back to me of like building trusting relationships, and how do you do that? You have to be transparent and let people know what you're working on as soon, immediate as they are. And oh, sorry, phone call came in. And fun. How do you have fun in that, right? We're working so hard, but how do you also include fun in that work? And the celebrations are part of that, right? If you have those successes, how do you celebrate those successes and enjoy and having fun together? I think the other part of what's worked is, you're always going to face resistance, but seeing those people that are carrying that kind of resistance, they're caring, they care about something about it, and they're bringing that up. And so how do you look at it in an empathetic way and really use that to help tune the project into success? That's a whole nother presentation. I'm sure people, resistance is a big thing, but looking at it not as resistance, but like there are people who care and want something to go in a way that they care about. That's been a big one. Having influential change champions to help it, and really having a good bit of them has been really successful. But yeah, I'll pass it along to someone else, but that's some of the core for me. And since we're short on time, I'll leave it there.
Yeah, I was just going to say, this is why I was so excited to get y'all in the same room, because even when we were having conversations, just like the 4 or 5 of us, like y'all are so passionate about this, and it shows in so many ways. Okay, I am going to call on a classic overthinker. Sarah, lessons learned. What has worked with change management and what has not?
Yeah, I mean, for sure, echo all of what Ben has said. Like the couple of things that pop into my mind, things that have not worked for me. It has to do with right sizing the OCM effort. In that, since I am a classic overthinker, it's easy for me to get really lost in the weeds and the details. And especially when I was first introduced to some of the methodologies, I could nerd out all day on on assessments and things like that, and having to take a step back and go, hang on, we don't have time for this, we don't have capacity, no one's really interested in it but me. And so that's been a lesson over time, is modifying my methodologies and the tools I use, and so I don't lose people. What has worked for me for sure is relationship building. It saves me every time, and it makes the work, that's what makes me passionate about the work, is the people. And I'm a strong believer that the employee at the end of the day is my customer. I'm working for them. I'm working for the laboratorian on the bench that's processing samples and trying to make their life easier. And so that methodology and that, kind of direction I take has not done me wrong yet. So I'm going to stick with that, is building trust and relationship with people who are the most impacted by the change.
Fran, any lessons learned? Probably not.
So many. So many. What I love about what both Ben and Sarah talked about is the fact that they pull it back to the personal experience, and that it's about the people that are going through the change, and it's about the people that are helping you create the change. And so remembering that change is inherently people-centric, I think, is really, really important. And to that end, for me, what definitely has not worked is when you try to force it. So, and that speaks a little bit to what Sarah said around, if you suggest, let's do a open house and ask questions, and you And everybody's like, no, that's a waste of time. We need to move past that. We don't need it. We've got all the data we need, and don't force it. Move on. I think also it's really important to remember that if you are by yourself, as a lot of you have alluded to here, you don't have a communications person, you don't have an OCM person on your team. If there's some tools that you can get your hands on to use when you're all by yourself, I cannot suggest better tools than the ADKAR model and SCARF. So if you have nothing else but the ADKAR model, it at least as a project manager or someone who's been asked to manage a project, you can step in and see, okay, the first part of this is awareness. What am I going to do to bring awareness around this thing that I'm doing? Who needs to be aware? How do they need to get the information? Is it the same information for every group? So it's just cluing in onto the steps in ADKAR will start to inform you about involving change management in the groundswell of what you're doing, in the DNA of your project. If you just start from the beginning and think, how do I need to awareness? How do I need to make that happen? And what will this look like if awareness doesn't happen? And that's how you sell it, right? So following the ADKAR staircase and remembering that people can move both directions, up and down, I think is just a really good, if you have no help and you're by yourself, but you know change management is important and you need to make it part of your project planning, use the ADKAR model. It's just amazingly helpful to break things up in a way that you can process and find useful and sell to other people. So that would be that. I would champion that. When it comes to like what doesn't work at all, it's again, as some of you have mentioned, it's when you're trying to make something happen for a sponsor that doesn't believe in what you're doing. And that's a waste of everyone's time. That project is going to fail. And that sounds horrible to say it that way, but the truth is, if your sponsorship is not interested or passionate about the thing that you're doing, when you get to the end and you're done, you're going to hand it off and they're going to chuck it over their shoulder and it'll never be seen again. And you just wasted personal experience here. You just wasted 5 years of you and 15 other people on your team's time being passionate and involved in this thing that when you, at the end of the day, when you hand it off to the owner of that thing that you just built to take forward, if they're not interested in it, it just goes away. So from the very beginning, knowing and understanding your sponsor and what they're trying to achieve, and that they definitely have a stake in what you're doing, that's one of the most important things. And one of the hardest things, one of the things that feels like a failure but isn't, is to call your own project and say, we don't have the right resources for this, we don't have the right support for this. And it's hard to do that here at the state, right? Because A, we've spent time and money and we can't waste that. B, we need this to happen tomorrow. And so we can't start over. Being the voice of the other side and saying, if we're not going to do this right, we're going to get to the end. And we're going to have to explain to everybody why we wasted all that time and all that money. And we still don't have a successful outcome. So we need to stop and go back and rethink. And that is probably one of the scariest, hardest to sell, emotional things as a project manager you can do, but it works. It works to tell them we need to start over. We need to change some things about this. All of these things are broken and here's why, and here's what's happening. And we need to go back and rethink. So that would be a piece of really hard to swallow advice that I would give.
So we are at about 1:53. I guess my thought was at about 1:55, I might turn it back to y'all. Maybe just like, what do you know what? I'm just going to do that. Cheryl, can I ask you a big favor? And can we skip to, I believe it's like the last slide marked final questions. Closing questions. So, and again, I just want to reiterate, I'm grabbing all these questions. I promise I will make sure that they get looked at. Thank you so much for your engagement. What's one thing you wish you would have known kind of coming in when you started your journey? Or what's one thing you would like folks to take away from this discussion? And let's go Sarah, Ben, Fran, please.
Gosh, what I think, maybe minor answers to both of them is the same, is I wish I would have learned sooner to not take everything on myself and just to reach out and ask for help when I need it. And even from, my leadership. And so I hope maybe you take away from this, and even this whole week of sessions, is that there's a whole community of people that are happy to lend an ear and share their experience and things like that. So I hope you take that away from this week.
Oh, Sarah, we didn't set this up, but that was a softball for my pitch. It was exactly that, right? I mean, this work is done best, to me, it's been in groups and a community. And so there is the community of practice. Change management community of practice meets right now quarterly. And tell me if maybe someone can put the link to the email if you want to become involved in that in the chat. But we have meetings that are both in person and then also hosted on Teams where we have presentations. There's in-person meetings where it's pretty a loose agenda where we can get, to the meat of things in a real nice way. You can meet people that are really in the trenches with you doing work, and you can really have that camaraderie that some of us really miss. So yeah, the community of practice has been a wonderful thing. And we're always looking for more people to be involved, give presentations. And so that's a huge part. So thank you. There you go. If you want to participate, you can email change@lni.wa.gov. So that's been a wonderful thing that I wish I knew before.
Thank you. And this is nobody's fault, but I'm realizing neither Cheryl nor I are able to put change@lni.wa.gov. So I will make sure you all get that ASAP. And I did not mean to interrupt. Fran, one thing you wish you would have known, or what would you like everyone to take away from this discussion?
So I strongly echo Ben and Sarah, and I wish I would have known at the beginning that it's not only acceptable but encouraged in this community to steal everything. That you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Someone else has already figured out this thing that you need to figure out, and you just need to find it and take it. And that we encourage that we offer that to each other, and that when we're in trouble, we talk to each other and we say, oh my gosh, I need to do this. Have you done that before? Do you have a format I could follow? Do you have a slide I could steal? And the answer is always yes. So I wish I would have known that, because I think a lot of us come up in the business world and there's this, you don't take credit for other people's work. You don't, if you get an assignment, you do it, and but don't, your community has what you need. Somebody out there has done it and failed at it and done it better. So steal it, take it freely, we give it. And I wish I would have known that at the beginning, because I wasted a lot of time making plans that weren't useful and creating documents and charts that someone else had done a better job at. And I wish that I would have clued into that earlier. The one thing that I hope every single one of you takes away with you, and I am so emotionally hurt at all the questions, the massively excellent questions you guys have that we didn't have time to get to, because oh my gosh, such great questions here. But the one thing I want you all to take away from this is that there's something that you can do. I think there's a lot of focus on, we don't have this and we can't do this and my sponsors don't do this. But for every single one of you, if you ask yourself that question, okay, so I can't do all of that, what can I do? There's always something towards change. There's always a way that you can step towards change if you just look for that thing that's in your control and in your sphere of influence. So there's always something that you can do to start your journey, and it's never too late. So I hope you guys take that from this too.
And Cheryl, if you don't mind too terribly, can you go to the next/last slide? That has the 3 panelists' email address. Oh, and I even put it on one slide. That is fantastic. So we are right at the end of our time, and I seriously cannot thank you enough. This was so much fun. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone. And thanks for all the IT support in the background. Couldn't do it without you. And just a big thank you to the participants and Cheryl and Jake for putting in so much in this conference. It's free for everyone, and lots would charge, but it's part of the COP. So if you like this, please, please, please come join the COP. We'd love to have you.
I'm excited to see what all of you are going to do. Thanks for showing up today.
Have a great day, everyone.